Prophet of Truth has found the Ark. Our only chance of stopping him is a surprise aerial assault. Clear this sector of Covenant anti-air defenses. Make a hole for the Admiral's ships. Good hunting. He's out.
I know it's pretty funny, right? I had Pokemon as the as the thumbnail.
Ready when you are, Chief. Open the door, take point. We'll cover you with the witness.
Glory, but their dull eyes will soon be closed, seared by the ring's unforgiving light.
Great lecture opening. Mark doesn't know where to go.
Open the door. We can roll on through.
I think there's going to be a control panel somewhere that I'm supposed to press the button on. Oh wait, here we go. Hello there. How are we doing? So, this afternoon, I'm kicking off with Halo. This happens to be Halo 3. This is where I'm up to at the moment, and a playthrough, a re-playthrough of Halo that I'm doing. I'm going back through now that they've re-released the Master Chief Collection on PC, because I don't think I even own the Xbox that I used to own for this, and I'm kind of going through all of the campaign. Let me just quit out of this. Because what we're talking about today is a bit about game building, world building, and things like that. And I find Halo, and not just Halo, but Bungie, the company that made Halo, and the work that they've done in the past and subsequent to Halo, is a very, very good example of what big budget AAA studios like to do with big, ambitious world building, character building, and how that kind of ties into our graphics. Because, like, you know, when we talk about graphics, and a lot of what we've talked about in this course so far has been very technical, mathematical, technical, nitty gritty, how to make this individual piece of something look like something. But I mean, like, none of that matters without a reason for this to exist, you know? And I think big games like Halo put that into perspective. Like, there's a lot of big games that really leveraged new technology as it came out. And so while some people are working on the tiny end, the scale of like, oh, how do we get realistic shadows to work in like the folds of cloth, you know, and everyone's like, oh wow, that is so specific. But I mean, that is what someone's going to do. Someone else, on the other hand, is saying, all right, if that tech exists, then, you know, how does it aid us in our storytelling? And it's always going to be going back and forth like that. And it's very, very important, I think, for us to remember the context in which we're using these things. So Halo, for me, I feel very, very attached to, in a way, that because it's funny, it came out when I was a uni student. So there was this point that the Xbox was released and Halo was a launch title on it. And I don't think it was particularly groundbreaking in terms of technical prowess. I mean, it kind of was a little bit, because it was bringing first-person shooters to consoles, so some kind of engine upgrade. Oh, I actually didn't do that. GoldenEye did that, but, you know. But it brought the big AAA console shooter into existence into its current iteration, where nowadays, you know, your giants like your Call of Duties and things like that are all, you know, selling more on console than they're selling on PC, and PCs where these things where these things originated. And I think Halo was the precursor to that. But what's important is that Bungie as a company has always been very, very dedicated to this idea of blockbuster action movie feel. And it always felt like that from every 5 seconds of combat gameplay through to 10 to 15 hours worth of campaign. Both of those scales felt like a blockbuster movie. So I know I'm digressing slightly from graphics, but in a sense I am, and in another sense I'm very much not. And so maybe I should get into the lecture, but that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about why graphics exists and why we might be doing it, and then I'm going to delve into the other side of graphics. So not necessarily the technical implementation of what we're doing, but why are we implementing these things? So this is a really funny lecture, because like as I was preparing this lecture, I was thinking, should I even be doing this? Should this be a graphics lecture? Should this be outside of the course? But I've learned to follow my gut on these things, and realizing that if the only thing I teach you is maths for the entirety of 10 weeks of graphics, then there's no context and there's no reason for it, which leaves you with this kind of bare bones education. Like, yes, you are fully capable of doing the graphics thing, but without understanding why it exists or what purpose it might serve, it's harder for you to actually deliver the right results, you know, as a graphics programmer. So bringing this back into the course, I was thinking either this is something that could be side to the course, or it's more important than all of the rest of the course. So I always like that when I hit that point where I'm teaching, where I think this maybe doesn't need to be included, or it's more important than everything I've been teaching. And whenever I hit that point, I realize, oh yeah, this lecture's got to go in. This is important. So let's get into it, right? So last week, actually, let's see, we've got a couple of questions here. Stardust was asking about Assignment 1 release and Mark's release, and Assignment 2 actual release. So the Assignment 1 Mark's release, we're expecting to have the initial submission, so nothing that is that needed had late penalty, although I think we're still marking those. But anyone who had an extension will probably not necessarily come out at this time, but we're expecting start of week 6. No 100% guarantee on that, but probably Monday week 6 will have about 80-90% of the marks released. We're going to just do them all in one batch though when they're all done. And the Assignment 2 specification release will happen around the same time. It's hard to do both at the same time, but it's kind of okay. The tutors will do the marking while I do the writing, but then we kind of then start like overlapping and needing to work together on it when we get closer to release. But I'm expecting, because I'm still sort of going through the survey results. Thank you for everyone who filled out the survey so far. It's been super, super useful. I was thinking actually of showing you the stats. I won't bother. I'll only show you the stats if we have time left at the end of the lecture. But it's not super important. But otherwise, I got useful information from you, and thank you for that. It's good. A bit of vindication for some of the decisions I made in the assignment design, and other just kind of feedback that's useful for the iteration for the second assignment. So anyway, what did we do last week? Last week, we were looking at kind of a lot of the technical details that allow us to deal with the complexity of things in 3D graphics. So scene graphs allows us to piece together multiple objects into one kind of compound object, or even the whole world, based on the transforms that place all the objects in the world somewhere. Also, we looked at using things like scene graphs within a character. So the pieces of the character could be different transforms. And I hinted that we were going to get into the idea of using that kind of thing to actually animate that character or fix that character into poses and things like that. We're going to start on that today, but the detail is on Wednesday. We also looked at depth testing and blending, so because polygon rendering has no notion of things that obscure other things, the things that can't be seen through, we have to tell what's in front, so we render what's in front last. And we had an idea of how to do that using the Z buffer, and also not exactly the same thing, but blending, which is our way of using transparency to look at objects in front and behind each other and apply color from both of them to the same fragment. Sorry, both fragments to the same pixel. And that was blending and transparency. And we saw that there's potentially a lot of problems with transparency, a lot of unsolved problems in the state of graphics at the moment to do with transparency. We also looked at parametric curves and splines because we have this idea that in our polygon rendering, everything is flat surfaces and corners. Like, literally everything is made up of only corners and flat surfaces. We don't have any other construct that we can use to make geometry. So how do we deal with curved surfaces? How do we deal with movement paths that aren't straight? And we really don't want those to be conceptually straight lines with corners, because then the angle of movement all the time is going to be in these straight lines, not these smooth flowing curves. And so we do need smooth flowing curves, even if we are unable in polygon rendering to render them as geometry. We're still going to use those curves. And that's not even the last we're going to see of them. We're going to see them more when we're going to do lighting as well, because the approximation of a smooth curve is still necessary at that point. Yeah, but so we talked about those using control points for curves and how they can be of great benefit to us as well. So you can play around with that actually, with like moving objects in a scene over a parametric curve and things like that. Okay, so not sure. Stardust said you really don't like that file. I don't know what file you're talking about there. Talk to us on Discord maybe afterwards, and we can talk about what it is, or maybe any kind of feedback that you've got. Maybe you've already put it in the survey, so I can just read it there, so that's all right. Okay, so what are we covering today? I've already kind of talked about the kind of things that we're going to talk about today, but we're getting a wide view today. We're thinking about the art that goes into graphics. So why is graphics a field? So why is it a field in the computing industry? Why does it exist? Why did people start doing it? You know, it's a very big question, and it's an interesting one to look at, because graphics of course exists for a purpose, but we need to know what that purpose is if we're going to make anything in it. And then we're also connecting our graphics. So this is kind of narrowing it a little bit, in a sense that graphics can be used for many things, but we're thinking about art. So we're thinking about things like games and films as art forms that use computer graphics as part of the medium that they use. So asking some big questions, some funny big questions like what is art? So today I am not providing answers. Some of these questions I am simply providing questions, and I'm saying this is something to think about, because some of these are questions that have never been answered. So humanity has not come up with answers to some of these questions, and so this is some of what we're looking at. And then we're going to delve in again, like into even more detail, and we're going to look at building a computer game. So we're actually going to do like a microcosm of that. We're going to build a computer game from scratch. We're not going to build it all, obviously. I mean, it is possible. If you've got your setup right and ready to go, you can kind of put a computer game together from scratch in like 2 hours. But we're not doing that. We're going to talk about it instead. But I'm going to take you through a lot of the design and concepting stuff that we might do for computer games, and then we're going to dive even deeper into this and talk about how a digital artist might create the assets that we eventually, as graphics or games programmers, or I guess games programmers is a nice big blanket term for anyone who might be doing this, or even programmers in film as well. It's slightly different. in film. The pipeline's not exactly the same, but because of most of what we're doing in this course is OpenGL, which is very much more game engine style graphics, we'll stick to that for the moment. But like, I think your understanding of how artists work should grow in both of those fields today, based on what we're talking about. Okay, so let's get into this. It's a weird question. It's a very big question. And I don't think I could give a very clear answer on this question, but like, why does graphics exist? If I was going to answer that, if someone was just going to throw that at me and I had to answer it without really thinking too deeply about it, I would say that humans have a wish to see a world that's not necessarily one that exists. So our imagination wants us to be able to see a world in a virtual environment, or we want to build a world in a virtual environment, or even in a really simplistic sense, we just want to see a representation of something else so that we can understand it better. And that takes us to, like, you know, a lot of the industrial applications for computer graphics. So some of the earliest computer graphics that I could find was this, the Sage control room, which the US Air Force put together in the 1950s, which was strategic something. I can't remember what it was. I looked up so much stuff for this lecture. This was one of the first things I looked up. Anyway, the function of this is a projection of information from all of the radar sites in the US. So this was like, you know, as often happens, new technology gets used in by big money government things first. So military is one of the things that might use technology first. So this was taking radar information from a large section of the United States of America and being able to put that together into a single image. So that's like one of the first pieces of graphics technology. And there's also, like in the 1950s, this thing called Tennis for Two, which was played on an oscilloscope. And it has this side-on view of a tennis court, and players are asked to basically use these controls to change the angle and strength with which they're hitting a tennis ball to hit it into the other side of the court. So it's interesting that, like, we've been trying to represent information, visualizing information in a way we can understand it better, or we've been trying to do simulations of the real world in a way so that we can take part in something that we maybe don't have the space or time at that point to take part in. And, like, you know, just some of the stuff that I'm talking about today, like, look at my thumbnail for this was Pokemon. It's a world that is, like, you know, it's sort of multiverse adjacent to our own, where people are still people, and, you know, houses and buildings and cars and roads and trees, all that stuff is the same, but there's these multitude of species of animals that are different from the ones that we know, but they have a much closer interaction with humans. They work with us and things, and there's this kind of cooperative thing going on, and we hunt them, which is a little bit weird, but, you know, but as if we don't, like, hunt and kill a lot of the animals on our own planet as well. But yeah, it's like there's just this slight shift, and it's like, what if, you know, what if we're in this fantasy world, and what can we do in this fantasy world? Or we look at Halo. There's this massive kind of, like, fantasy of being the hero in a movie, like, set in a future where you can kind of still understand it, but you still get to be the hero in this future. So there's this advanced technology, because a lot of us just kind of get excited about future technology and things like that. And so there's this kind of, there's these two ways of looking at it. Sometimes we're trying to replicate reality or show reality in a way that we can understand it better. And there's other ways where we're trying to go beyond the reality that we have. We're trying to see a world that that doesn't exist, but can we inhabit that world? So can we live out our fantasies and things? So there's a really interesting kind of thing where graphics comes from that. You know, graphics comes from that that will to see another world, the will to see, like, a virtual world. And I put this one in here because it's really, really new. Some stuff that the graphics industry is working on at the moment is the replication of a realistic human being. So this is the Siren project by Cubic Motion under I don't know if it's under Epic Games or just in partnership with Epic Games. So using the Unreal Engine for real-time simulation of a human being. And so we're getting to this idea of, I don't know, people have heard of the Turing test. I assume people have heard of the Turing test if you're in computer sciences. The Turing test was done as a way of testing the intelligence level of a computer by seeing if the computer could trick a human into not being able to tell whether it's a computer or a human. And one of the things that we've always had to do with that is when you're testing, so you're testing computers and you're testing humans, and you have to see whether you can tell them apart. The way they had to do it was through, say, a text interface or something like that. And if you do it via a text interface, then you can't physically tell if it's a human or a computer. But this is trying to get us to the point where you can see the visuals of the computer and still not tell that it's not a real human. Epic Games and Unreal have been working very, very hard on this in the last few years to try to get realistic, real-time human appearances. And you can see from the prevalence of like what's come up in the last few years of deepfakes and stuff like that. So they went to a great deal of effort to deepfake. I think the Star Wars series has done the most in terms of what's been happening in movies with deepfakes. Is who was it? Grand Moff Tarkin in one of the films, Princess Leia in a couple of them recently. No, that's a spoiler. I'm not going to say that one. There was another one in another thing. Shh, shh. Don't say it. Yeah, so there's been other. I realized I got halfway through that, I nearly said it, and I was like, no, I don't want to spoil stuff. Anyway, there's some other Star Wars stuff that has happened recently that's had some teeth there. Yeah, Cineo retracted the message. Yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot of this stuff going on, and it's the idea like, is there some goal for the graphics industry? Because I know that for heaps of people working on graphics, one of the goals is realism. Can we reach a point where someone can spend time in a graphic simulation or watching a movie and not be able to tell whether it was CG or live action? You know, I mean, that would be a pretty funny movie because like it would be something that it would have been cheaper and easier to just film. But could you do it in graphics and convince people that the whole thing had been filmed? And I think that's like a very, very difficult thing to do in graphics. But I also don't think that's the end of the line. So for some people, that might be the end of the line. Once we can convince humans that this is completely real, then there's no more goal in graphics. But I don't think that's necessarily the only thing, because there's a whole lot of other things we can do with graphics, because that's only the realism side. That's not the fantastical side. That would be like saying to the artificial intelligence field in computing to say that once they'd created a computer as smart as a human, then they would just stop. And that's preposterous, because we've already created computer systems that can outsmart humans in specific domains, and there's no reason to stop doing that. Like there is use for things that are smarter than humans. And so maybe the graphics industry has some kind of thing to think about there as well. Like, what can we do with like hyper stylized things that takes us beyond reality? But anyway, I digress, and I should continue because there are more slides than this one today. But this follows on from that. This is the slide that I called the Sony slide. There were actually more images on this slide, and they were all from Sony. So I don't know why that was the case. But I have a feeling that Sony's putting a lot of emphasis into artistic vision in computer games recently, but also in films. So graphics is for humans. I can say this, and I can think that at least I'm being reasonably objective in saying that. Is the purpose of graphics is for human vision, right? There's very, very little graphics or very little movies or games or anything that aren't made for humans. And those that are made for our pets, which is like only one step away from entertaining us anyway. So very much more than other computing fields. A lot of other computing fields, they do ultimately serve human goals, right? They're things that make sense for us to need. Like, for example, network connectivity. Did anyone see Facebook go down recently? There's some really good like debriefs on why that happened and stuff. It's quite interesting. But a lot of that tech is like, yes, in the end, it's for human needs, for our needs for communication. But a lot of the details of it is just straightforward, kind of like computers talking to computers, them organizing the network amongst themselves. But with graphics, it's very much a lot of tech just to get the right images into human eyes at the right speed, that humans will believe it. So the judgment, like, line on whether this stuff works or not is whether it tricks humans or not. It's not whether this stuff functions without, say, cutting Facebook off from the internet for 8 hours or something like that, right? So heaps of it is actually just us wanting to see something. Computer graphics is made because humans want to see stuff, and it's more than just visuals. It's more than just what we see. It's can we be entertained? Like a spectacle. We want to believe. So we're going to look at stuff that's on a screen, and if it grabs us in its artistry, then we will believe it, you know? So it's nearly even, I could nearly even say that a lot of the technical advances in computer graphics were not necessary. They're fun. They're fun and they're really good, and we wouldn't necessarily get a game like Ghost of Tsushima or something like that without it, because these hyper-realistic games really do need a lot of technology to make them work. But you get something like Into the Spider-Verse, where heaps of the tech in that is intentionally using slightly lower tech in specific ways to tell a story. Really good. Watch that movie and break it down into the different types of animation used in that movie per character. Each of the characters animates in different ways depending on their context and their history. Super interesting. So intentionally using different pieces of lower technology, in a sense, so that they will have their own personality. So I think that's super cool, and that is like where we get to graphics being a support of an artistic vision. So if we place ourselves there, so this is me talking to you as if you are all computer scientists thinking about like developing graphics as part of your career. So, and I understand that some people here may not even necessarily be doing that. Some people here might be people who end up creating the art instead of the graphics. But I'm going to do it from that perspective because I think that's the majority perspective here, is that us as graphics people are going to basically be providing the technology for people to then create the things that they want to create this art. So it's kind of like, I mean, if we take it to a really basic physical perspective, in a sense, so I've got these bottles of paint here. There's some blue and some green and some red, some orange, right? So I got all these paints, and someone developed those paints. Someone went to great lengths to find the right kind of materials in the world that made the pigments to make those paints. That is someone who is using technology to enable someone else's art. And a lot of what graphics development is we're using technology to enable someone else's art. Enable someone else's art. So what is art? Just gonna say, someone there can't hear something. Although I think a lot of people can hear, because people have been telling me stuff in the comments that appears to mean that they can hear. So you may have to check your own audio for that. Anyway, I'm not qualified to answer this question. Or everyone's qualified to answer this question. But either way, I have a feeling that our response to art is entirely subjective. Our response to art is ourselves. So we can't, either we can all say what art is, or none of us can say what art is. So I'm just like, I'm just throwing out possibilities here. Art is an expression of human emotion. Notice I put all of these as question marks because I don't know if these are all true. A creation of something that isn't purely utilitarian. So utilitarian means it's just there for a use. So I could make a chair that's just for sitting on, but I could also make a chair that's for sitting on that looks cool. And then it's art. You know, it's a piece of art because it's an expression of what I thought looked cool. You know, it may have a functional purpose, but it may also still be art. So it's hard to say whether stuff that's just for use is not also art, is not also something you're going to appreciate from its aesthetic value, or even just the joy that someone created something, you know? Is art designed to be experienced by others? I would say pretty easy to say no to that, but it's also very easy to say yes. Much of art is designed to be experienced by others, but that doesn't mean that you creating a painting, or for example, creating an assignment 1 in this course, just because it resonates with something that you love, doesn't mean it has to be for anyone else for it to be art. And something that evokes an emotional response in viewers, yes, a great deal of art will do that. But whether that makes it art or not, maybe only the attempt to evoke an emotional response, and it doesn't have to be in others or in anyone who views it, including yourself. Maybe that's enough to make it art. So it's an impossible question. It's a huge impossible question that people with way more kind of time and effort to study this and capability and background knowledge in this can talk about the answers to this question much better than I can. But either way, I'm happy to say that I don't think that there's a good answer to this. I put in Starry Night here. I think it's hard to say. Oh, maybe I should have put the Mona Lisa in there. I was trying to think of the most famous piece of artwork in the world. I think it's the Mona Lisa. Starry Night's probably number 2, I would say. But yeah, there's a few things that have been like the kind of, you know, it's like you can't define what art is. And that's the beauty of it. If you can't define what it is, then there's no boundaries on it. That means there's lots of things you can do that are creative human expression. So that's really cool. So the one thing I can say for certain is that computer graphics is a medium for art to be created. There's many mediums for art to be created. I showed you my paints a second ago. That's one medium. But there's lots of different painting mediums. Like people talk about painting on canvas being one thing, painting on board being another. I paint miniatures, which is a completely different thing because that's like a collaboration between a painter and a sculptor in a sense. And all this kind of stuff. And so computer graphics has, you know, a simulation of sculpting, a simulation of painting. But what it also brings in is some of the stuff that we only got in the previous century and not for like thousands of years of art before that, which is animation. The idea to have your artistic creations then moving in real time. And games added to that significantly by saying your artistic creations are now interactive. You can literally work with them in real time. They react to you in real time in some way or another. And that's where we get to like games, which is, I don't want to say it's the newest art form created in the world, but maybe. I mean, like, again, I'm playing around with definitions here that I don't fully understand. So, you know, I could say that if I want to. So computer games art. So art in computer games and computer games as art. So like we're narrowing. We're just like computer graphics is massive field. A significant part of computer graphics is creation of art. And then we're looking at like art just in computer games and computer games as art. We can get closer to something that we can start actually picking apart and looking at the nitty-gritty and how we put it together. So computer games are a form of art, right? In terms of like, they are obviously an expression of human creativity, and they're something that people partake in for their entertainment and for an emotional response and that kind of thing. So they fulfill a lot of the vague definitions that we put. They're all vague anyway, right? So we can just say computer games are a form of art. This used to be a contentious statement I don't know, I'd say like a decade ago, people were arguing whether computer games could be art or not. That was just purely gatekeeping. That was just a bunch of people who thought that like art would be was only those arts that have been created already, and the newest one was not allowed to join the party and be art, which is a classic human response to things, right? It's idiotic human response that we get into a lot of the time, which is like, I'm in here now with my stuff, you're in there with your stuff, you can't come in, you know? Classic gatekeeping response. But yeah, computer games are quite widely acknowledged as being art at the moment, and I could give them a title as digital immersive interactive storytelling or something, and then all this stuff really comes together as an artistic medium, you know, especially nowadays that like there's so much of like fine arts is doing immersive digital things, and it's like, well, okay, if you're going to come in and take the game technology and call it art, then you're going to have to acknowledge that the stuff that had already been built in the game technology was art before you got there. But yeah, computer graphics is integral in nearly all games. I don't want to say all games, even though, like, you know, it's the vast majority of games. So there's really, really cool niche games that don't use graphics. So there's a bunch of interesting games that are audio only and stuff like that. And there's some really cool stuff there that is kind of interesting, because you can see how people might make audio only games for the interest of experimentation into like how people hear things, or for the interest of accessibility. People who are blind but still love games might still really want to play things. So very, very cool. But yeah, for the moment, because we're in a computer graphics course, unfortunately we are abandoning one level of accessibility because we're quite focused on the visuals here. So we're going to be doing stuff that are visual. So the graphics in a game are going to be based on what the game needs. And we don't know what a game needs until we start kind of developing it. Us as graphics programmers might be doing things like building a game engine, right? So we might be building like what you've been doing in this course, you know, building up the capability to move objects around, transform objects, view objects from camera perspectives and things like that. All of that kind of stuff is the stuff that we build as graphics programmers. But, you know, a lot of the time we'll just reuse stuff that's been built already. I mean, the same way, like, we're not programming directly to our graphics card, we're letting OpenGL be our API into that. Because if we were doing direct to the graphics card, we'd be like, I don't know, 20, 30 weeks in before we'd even see anything on the screen, right? We'd have to learn about the hardware and things. So we're always abstracting to a certain level. But we can acknowledge that us as graphics programmers are building the tech that supports the art in the same way that someone formulating paint pigments is going to be doing that. Someone sculpting out of clay is allowing someone else a chance to then use it afterwards for their art, you know, like that kind of thing. Oh, one of the best examples is a composer. A composer is putting together a blueprint for music, but then the musicians separate to the composer might be playing that music, and you get this wonderful situation of artists collaborating across great distances with each other, and different performances of the same piece of music are going to sound different depending on who's performing it. And so you get this beautiful kind of thing where different artists put their interpretation on the same thing. I find the act of playing music to be the closest thing to the modern idea of interactive art, in a sense. Like, if everyone had the capability to play music, it's a similar thing. Everyone kind of, you need a bit of learning to be able to play music. You also need a bit of learning to play computer games. And then you're interacting with the art directly, and then you're taking it somewhere that the blueprint may not have said it should go originally. And that's super interesting, right? A lot of, like, we call emergent gameplay and stuff like that comes from that. So let's focus this in. And I'm going to talk about the concept of a computer game. And we're going to do this super practical today. So this is a bit of an experimental thing that I'm doing. Is we're going to make a computer game today. We're not going to make it. We're going to design it. We're going to concept it. Actually, we're not even going to design it. We're going to concept a computer game today. So I love that. I just talked for like a whole minute to get back to the actual slide. I was thinking about this when I gave it this title. So we're going to concept a computer. I don't know if a concept is a verb, but anyway, we're going to do it. We're going to create a computer game concept, and this is going to be a speed run of the kind of game pitch process. So we're going to put together, I've done this before as an exercise with game students, but also like done this before as actually how we're going to start working on a game project that might go for a couple of months or stuff. But if it's going to go for a couple of months, it would take longer than like the half hour or so that I've assigned to this today. But what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a game pitch, which is how we kind of formulate an idea into a few concrete kind of pieces of ideas. And then we're going to look at how we might build this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take probably whatever character we end up making for this game, hoping we get a character. If we don't get a character, we'll do something else. And take it through the process of creating it. Now, I don't do this very often, so we'll see how well it goes. I'm not necessarily a game designer, even though I have designed some, and I'm definitely not a 3D artist. So I'm still going to talk you through the process, and some of the things that get done to get us the game assets that we're going to use. And I'm going to talk about the technical stuff behind it on Wednesday. But for the moment, let's put together a game. So some of the things that we're going to do here is building up an idea of what are the triggers for the human imagination that are going to make this work. And work is a very open idea. So we're not really necessarily targeting a specific audience. Someone has already talked about microtransactions. And someone else is talking about addictions. So yes, there is a healthy amount of cynicism here to the way that computer games are being created and marketed nowadays. Just want to say, I was flipping a coin between two games to play today. One of them was Genshin and the other was Halo, and I went with Halo because it had more historical significance to what you know about graphics, but but I was nearly going to go into a gacha game. So we're going to break this down into some pieces like setting, characters, story, and gameplay. So some ideas there, and I'm going to talk about these things, but we're actually going to like practically put this together as well. So let me... make a new document. Okay, so I've just got a blank document here, which I will be editing. I'll edit this as we go. I might draw some pictures as well. I wonder if I can insert drawings in here. Oh, maybe we'll use paint as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just setting up the idea that I would normally have had like a whiteboard or something like this. I've actually done this in the past in like a PAX panel style thing. It's not actually a PAX panel. But I did it with an artist. So I had a friend who was drawing while I was talking to the audience and getting ideas and stuff like that. So actually I don't want that full screen. We're going to be going through it. So let's open up with our setting. So the first thing that we want to think about is where is this game happening? Okay, so the first thing that we've decided already, we've locked ourselves in that this is going to be a game. So we're doing game rather than film at the moment because I think we're a little bit closer to that in this course because everything we're doing is real time. So I'm going to ask questions. And I'm happy for anyone to answer these in chat any way you want to. So I was going to put up like a poll or something like that, but I figure we can just say stuff in chat. So the first question is a really interesting one. And I came up with this question because it steers us in a particular direction just based on these three words: world, realm, or planet. And you can kind of see how I'm steering us in particular kind of computer game trope directions at this, right? So, feel free to write in chat now. I see there's about 40 people here. So if anyone wants to take part, write one of these 3 words in chat now. And whichever one pops up the most at the beginning is the way we're going to start this. So this is how we're going to do this. We're going to be pretty open. I'm going to take your ideas and just throw them in and see how these work. So I will wait for chat. There's a YouTube poll function. Oh, I'm going to do it in a poll. Okay. Wait. Okay. So you don't have to type it in. Haha. Haha. Poll. Wait, where did that poll go? Did that actually appear? Oh, wait, there it is. It's happening. There's 11 votes so far. The poll worked. I'm happy with that. I didn't realize that YouTube had that. I don't know if that's recent or I've just never looked at what we had available. Okay, I'm gonna go quickly because I don't want to like waste time on this stuff. But we're going planet. So the cool thing is we've already set up a kind of a context there. Oh, I'm ending the poll while they're even. It's been around for a few months, so I didn't even look at. Okay, so we're looking at a planet. And we can think of lots and lots of games that have some kind of significance to planet. And that's cool. Our connotation now is some kind of sci-fi, but it doesn't have to be. For example, games with planet in their title, as in Little Big Planet, had no notion of sci-fi or flying into space or anything like that, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But this is where we're going. Planet has the implication of technology, whereas realm has the implication of some kind of magical fantasy thing. World allows us to be quite open and do other things, which is why I think no one went for it, because it was too open. Okay. Another poll. Human scale, smaller or larger? And this is really interesting, right? Because, yeah, Cineo also says Final Fantasy VII has this theme of saving the planet, whereas it's actually more of a realm game in a sense. So whether people want this at a human scale, because that's the average, like most games are done at a human scale. They have your vision at human head height and you move around and things like that. But there's plenty of options for other things there. So I'm going to only leave that open for a little while longer because I don't want to like get too bogged down in the polls. Outer Wilds, yeah, very much right. A very small planet where you can actually see the curvature of the planet. Commerce is asking, so what is smaller and what is larger? That's a good question. We don't know the answer yet. We are creating the answers as we go. So this is one of the rare times in a computer science degree that you will be asked to take part in a completely creative concept. We are at human scale at the moment. I'm going to end it in 5, 4, 3, 2. I did my fingers wrong there. 1. All right, we're at human scale. So what we have now, are we just making Halo? Kathy was like, humans boring. I know, but it went that way. It was actually really looking like it was going to go the other way at the beginning, but then it evened back out. Yes, we can say it's boring just because so many games are there. Oh, you was asking, is Animal Crossing human scale? I would potentially say Animal Crossing is larger than human scale because we're so, like, we're viewing it from a distance, you know? So the scale that we're thinking about is actually buildings and trees and things, not humans. The humans are actually very small compared to what's going on. What I was doing a second ago, Halo, where I was inhabiting a character, puts us well and truly in human scale, but there's plenty of other games that you consider to be basically be human scale as well. Most third-person games are going to be like that. So what makes it stand out? Is it dangerous? Is there some kind of technology, magic, or special features happening there? I guess the difficulty with something like Animal Crossing is nothing is to scale with each other. So the fish are gigantic. And you can dig fossils out of the ground that are actually gigantic, but also you can carry them as tiny little objects. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah, Pokemon could be human scale or could be considered slightly larger. Again, we're not really going to be held down by these terms, but they give us a starting point. There's something really interesting about creativity, is that if you ask someone to create something from nothing, it's very, very difficult. But if you give someone boundaries, they can suddenly be creative within those boundaries. If I say to someone, you have to make a computer game that involves a human on a planet, and then suddenly ideas start to flow, which is really weird because our entire existence involves a human on a planet because we're a human and we're on a planet. But it makes us think about things in certain way. So, what makes this stand out? So let's talk about the setting. Oops. The setting. What makes this planet interesting? Jason brings up a very good point. It's about execution, not idea. Yeah, this is also the beauty of this, is we can generate this idea and just throw it away. I had a game design teacher tell me once that they did this exercise with their students, that the students were like, how do I find out whether I've got a good idea or not? How do I come up with a good game idea? And so they asked the students to just come up with 100 ideas for games in an hour. Just anything, just 100 ideas for games, and they could do it. And the lesson was actually that ideas are cheap. Like, ideas are completely cheap, but whether you can take one of these ideas through to actually making it work is different. Kathy's asking if there's a games course. There's officially one. There's one called Game Design Workshop. Old friend of mine actually put that course together. Would have been 10 years ago? I don't know if it's 10 years ago or less than 10 years ago. But since he left UNSW, it hasn't run. I have thought about it, but I mean, like, where's the spare time for things like this? You know, I've got so much work to do. But yeah, there is the potential for something like that happening at some point. There's a course in VR and stuff like that, I think, but I don't know if that's a games course, but it's an interactive VR stuff. So it's going to be more games than graphics is. Okay, so another question I have to ask. Someone tell me something about this planet that makes it stand out. Is it like the Earth? Ooh, okay, Cineo's got one there. The planet's time flows faster than rest. Okay. Time flows faster compared to other planets. Very cool. You were saying Breath of the Wild, bring order back to the rich and anarchy world. Okay, so the world is the world isn't balanced. Some form of disorder. What other people are saying? Rory's saying planet is close to a black hole. Oh, okay. Alright, I'm gonna edit this one then. In some part. Proximity to a black hole makes time go differently in different, I guess, hemispheres. Or just parts. We don't necessarily have to follow science. This is a creation of fantasy. It can be anything we want. It's a low-gravity planet. I'm going to keep this one, because I think we're going to talk about this one in story. Yeah, and Kumarash is saying the same thing. Different parts of the planet flow at different speeds. Hexus says everyone has 6 fingers. I'm going to hang on to that one. We'll hang on to that one for character. And apparently this is the Doctor Who ripoff. But that's okay. There are no new ideas. Every idea you have is going to have some element of other things that already existed. Okay, so here is our setting. Is it dangerous? Hexus was like, that was a joke suggestion. Too late. It's in. It's happened. Wait, was it your suggestion? Doesn't matter. We're going with it, right? Okay, we got a lot of other ideas, but I'm gonna stick with what we've got here because this is something that we can use. So it's a planet where time flows faster in different parts of the planet, and it has low gravity. Something is wrong, but we'll get to that in a moment because that is a good thing. Technology, magic, special features. Is this what era of humans are we looking at here? If you want to, you can give us a year. So your answers here, give us a year in our dating system. And also some idea if there's something else going on other than that. So it's multiple people saying prehistoric. Okay. Some people are saying steampunk, medieval fantasy. Jason's like going for a trope. 2021, medieval, 10,000 BC. All right, I've got enough votes now. Yes, Rory's got an interesting one. Prehistoric era on one side of the planet. High-tech future on the other. I can already see this. This is going somewhere. All right, we don't even need any more. Why do people, human or otherwise, live here or not? I'm going to leave that one because I think that we can skip ahead to characters. Okay. I don't need that. So there's our setting. All right. I like this setting. I think this is interesting. We can do something with it. Obviously, there were more settings in chat. There's more stuff going on, but we're just not, like, we're just going to move on because, like, we're just going for one idea. Often when I've done this exercise, we've done it, like, 4 times in a row because people had other ideas they wanted to explore later. But we don't have time for that in this lecture. I still think this is a super cool exercise, and it teaches you a lot about what we do when we're making games, because this already, like this and this together, we've already come up with a game that doesn't exist. Like, we've come up with a game which is something that someone could make an interesting game out of. So that's really cool. But anyway, let's get on to the characters. So characters, are they human or not? We're often human-centric, right? Because 100% of our audience is human. Well, again, apart from like the games people make for their pets and things, most all the time, or games made for animals, games are usually made for human consumption. Yes, Sinio was saying someone draw concept art for this and upload it on Discord. We're going to talk about concept art in a second, actually. I will do some drawings as well. So what we're getting is the idea of a kind of a divided Earth, and this side, hang on, I'm going to join them up. I'm going to fill in this side with that, this side with that, and then I'm going to draw these kind of lush continents. I'm just kind of just doing this quick, all right, on this side, and then on this side we've got these kind of massive orbiting structures and and lights and things, and that's our cover. That's our cover picture of this, is like this world that's kind of split between these two dualities in a sense. All right, but what we would have potentially is, all right, we have that's the background of the image, but what's the image in front of that? Because we said that this was going to be at human scale on this world, so it's not about the world, it's about someone's interaction with the world. Hamish is like, is there a clear divide between sci-fi and prehistoric or gradual change? Don't know. I don't think it's important, but I think for gameplay, when we discuss gameplay, it's probably important, because I think what we're going to want to do is the switch between the sides must be dramatic. But we'll talk about that later. Kathy's got a cool one. You can choose your character from primal or technologically advanced side. Okay. Choose between primal or tech as your starting character. 2 campaigns. 2 separate campaigns. Full playthrough is both. And each one reveals details about the other that you didn't know. So the order you play makes it a different experience. Yeah, how's that? You like that one? I like that idea though. Okay, so and Rory's like, surely the satellites can't go all the way around, otherwise it would take decades. Yeah, so I'm assuming that this kind of big satellite array thing is a geosynchronous sort of thing, so it just stays above the tech area, and this area, like, I wanted to draw little volcanoes and stuff like that, you know, it's very prehistoric, even though the volcanoes, yeah, so it's geologically, it's older here, it's more active still, it hasn't settled down like this side has. Anyway, the picture is just me fooling around with paint, right? Yeah, and Kathy's like, yeah, they link up the end. Yuhu's House saying it sounds like StarCraft. So, like, there could be a little bit of that, right? You play these different campaigns, right? Yeah. Kamarsha saying could play as both and switch main characters to show both sides of the story until you hit the climax and both characters meet. 100% could do that. Yeah. Could go back and forth. You know something that's really cool about this? What we're doing at the moment is we're concepting a piece of art. This isn't a game yet. This is a movie or a novel still. Like, this is still a story, a setting and a story. And that's the beauty of this, is that computer games do not exist in a vacuum. They don't exist in a world where only they are created. We can use a lot of the same techniques that we'd use to start writing a book or a short story, or think about a short film or a feature film or something like that. This same thing would happen there. So I think that's kind of cool, and that's why you get people from different disciplines taking part in these kinds of things. Detroit Become Human. So, like, yeah, the idea of jumping between characters, jumping between main characters, is definitely something that's been done before. So we can trust that that's probably going to work. However, we need to get a little closer than that, right? So what are these humans' relationship to the setting? Do they have any backstory? Do they have a reason to exist? And so we have this. So let's look at the political climate, or other sort of social reasons. It doesn't have to be social. It could be like scientific, but all scientific reasons end up being social one way or another. A lot of lessons in storytelling from, who was it? John Romero? No, that's the Quake guy. Who was the Dawn of the Dead? They don't remember that director. It doesn't matter. I feel bad because I'm quoting a director. I've forgotten their name. But zombie movies aren't about zombies. As much as the zombies are a big part of it, zombie movies are about the human characters and how they interact with each other in that crisis situation. And we like seeing stories that are very human based. So there has to be a reason for these two characters to exist. And what is the hook that brings them into this world? So, prehistoric guy is a descendant of the leader of a tribe. Futuristic dude is a smart guy starting off as a soldier in the army. Okay, we're getting a bit tropey there. I don't want to get too tropey. You usually have saying can be the beginning of a new interstellar colonial. Okay. Here's the political climate. Tech side is launching a colony ship. So that's where we get that kind of thing. A new interstellar colony, and they don't know who to bring. Cineo's got a nice one. So, tech side, I'm gonna stop using gender pronouns on these as well, because like I don't think that we're going to like, I don't want to cast these as particular like male yet, right? So with the tech side's a robot, so it's not even a guy, it's just a thing. So it's a robot designed to be able to explore the primal side, which means it can operate at slower speeds or something like that. It has the ability to temporal shift between them. Okay, so we've got the tech side. Jason's asking about gameplay. We'll talk about gameplay soon. Is it an RPG? Is it an FPS? Or is it a tactical kind of thing? There's so many options. Kathy's saying we can let the player choose their backstory as well. So there could be multiple different backstories. And that also changes the game we're making. Okay, so let me throw examples at you. Is this game a... does it play like Uncharted? Or does it play like Elder Scrolls? So, is it a game where it doesn't matter who your character is? They can forge their own path? Or is it a game that is tightly reined in? So then we start actually going to one of the other headings. So let me actually put some of the other headings in. Story and gameplay. Because they might actually change what happens when we come back to these. So maybe we don't need these fleshed out. So for example, characters in some games, let's take, like, I don't know, like Mario in the early days, there's no backstory. There's nothing even important. There's the tiniest amount of story. And everything in that was about the gameplay. And the setting had something, but even then it was like kind of not real anyway. Tech side hits a primal main character's primal village in the end. Primal MC kills God. Okay, we're spoiling the whole story here, but like, you know, maybe something like that happens. One main story, one character is tightly reined in, and the other user may be more invested and customizable. Yeah. Okay, so we're getting into like wild possibilities here. But okay, so one of them, the tech side, is a robot that's designed to be able to explore the primal side, which means it can operate at different speeds. The primal side character is like, we've had a lot of possibilities here, is some kind of tribal heir. So we're talking about someone who is potentially going to be a leader of a tribe sometime in the future. Gets caught up in the robot's story in some way. We don't know yet. We would probably want to spend a few months writing. You know, we'll get someone in to talk about how this goes together. So we'd get an actual author in, or a script writer or something in like that. Primal side can be monkey. And there's a whole lot of stuff here, right? There's a whole lot of stuff about, okay, overarching themes, colonization, inequality, nature versus technology, There's so much stuff that we could do here. There's so much stuff we can delve into. I mean, these are all very, very common things that humans like to look at. You know, humans like to delve into these difficult concepts of like what's going on here, and we can tell a very vibrant story like this. So I don't know if we've already talked about story now that we're here. Story is not just a narrative. It's not just one step to the next. It's also the world. We've already started building a lot of our story. So the background here, conflict between cultures. Overt or not implied. Is it overt or is it an undercurrent? The two different cultures. One of them worships technology in a sense, and the other one, so it's nearly like fast life versus slow life. You know, people who like super chill, and they're just like, dude, you don't have to keep pushing for things, you know, just relax. And other people, it's like, I have to mine Bitcoin, right? It's like some people really, really embrace technology and go for it, and other people are like, you just need to like get your own head chill and sort it out, right? And so this is conflict between these two cultures, and that's super relevant for a game that we might make now, because this is something that's happening right now in our world. The conflict between the high-tech world and the I don't want to call it low-tech, because it's not necessarily low-tech, but it's like wanting a different thing. Even you can even use technology, but you want a different thing out of it. You want it to support you versus you want to like embrace it, you know? So it's like, there was in a novel I read ages ago, like, there was this thing called change for the machines. And it was just this phrase that someone used where they were trying to like, trying to get something out of a vending machine. And they said, I need change for the machines. And in the end, it resonates into this idea that what people had to do was they had to change for the machines. So instead of the world serving them, humans ended up serving the machines. So it was like change for the machines is something that we used to say to put money into a vending machine to get food out of. But now it had moved on to this idea that no, humans had to change so that the machines were more comfortable. And it was like very, very deep, very interesting. Okay, so let's see what people are saying potentially. Commercial saying romance between tribal and robots. I think that could be really interesting if the two sides get caught up. So I don't know if that should be in story, not characters. Characters and story are so intertwined, it's hard to separate them. So there's some kind of romantic interest between the two main characters. Now, this could be a point where we create tension between the two main characters without making it actually happen unless the player decides they want to go that way. So you can shift it in or out of that possible perspective, which is cool. So romantic interest between two main characters. This also asks us really, really good questions. So this is such a sci-fi question. Can a robot feel love? So good, so good. I mean, it's classic, right? It's not the first time this question's been asked, but also like it's kind of interesting thing. Sinio was like, robot isekai. I don't know that, but it's like time I reincarnate into robot in a primal world. Tribal person's sister got lost on the unknown side. Main tribal person was curious what's on the other side and why no one has ever come back. Yeah, okay. Tribal side tells stories about people leaving and never coming back. Tribal main character had a family member leave and is curious. This is totally like city-country kind of thing, you know, people from the country moving to the city. And then wondering whether they would ever come back. And it's literally, like, you know, the city moves faster than the country, but now it's like literal. Time literally moves faster. And maybe they never come back because once they've acclimatized to a different speed of living, they actually can't survive the other one. And so maybe even if they go there, And then when they go to the city, they end up seeing this kind of massive social inequality, and they have no money, and they have no skills, and they cannot survive there. They still can't go home. And so maybe it's this dystopian kind of thing. So the tech side is a dystopia with the ex-tribals being a lower class or something like that. Yeah, who knows? Something like that, right? Anyway. And people are saying sounds a little like Avatar. Yeah, totally. And plot of Blade Runner. So obviously what we have done is we have hit sci-fi and we're just grabbing tropes from sci-fi, right? Which is interesting, right? So there's stuff that we can do. Obviously, this is something we're coming up with in half an hour, so it's not going to be very good. But it is going to be reasonably complete. All right, I'm not going to go any further than that. This is quick, but there's enough here going on. Let's talk about gameplay, because that's one thing though. Like this gets a little bit more concrete in terms of what we're doing here, in terms of how we might implement this and stuff. Because what we have is a potential setting, because we did say a planet at human scale, so we're looking at it at human scale, which brought us very much to a character-driven game. So we've picked two characters, both of which are human size. So we're going to say the robot is, because it was designed to explore the primal side, it has human features, because I think they wanted to send a robot across that wasn't going to be too threatening by being different in a sense. So what kind of gameplay are we looking at here? Like a lot of people, someone's saying third person. Like, I think that makes sense. So the reasons why we might go into third person is that with swapping characters, we need to remind the player who they are. Because the worst thing that you can get is like you're in an environment where both of the characters are there and you forget which one you are at that point in time. So third person's going to make sure you never forget. One of them's like, I don't know, metal with lights on it and stuff like that, and the other one is like skin with furs and things. So like they're very obviously going to be different. So let's go for third person. It's easy. We don't have to develop anything new. We can use kind of game engines that already exist and stuff like that, because in terms of tech, we already have one huge thing that we're going to do, which is really different. How do we deal with the time thing? I don't know. Like, do we make stuff move differently? Do we do really cool motion blur stuff? Like, I don't know, you know? Yeah, and Anne's got an idea there. Like, maybe the events of the game tick faster when you're playing one character. So maybe one character is able to see the world like it's going slower, pick things out and stuff. So we could, okay. Switch between real-time and turn-based. The primal character is always in real time. They have no control of time because time moves faster than they do. The tech character is from a faster timeline, so they can plan out actions, etc. We could even do this where the tech character cannot act in real time because the world goes so slow that they can't kind of do it. So all they can do is put things in motion and then shut down and wait for those things to happen and then start back up again afterwards. Because if they were to try to do it in their notion of real time, their batteries would run out before anything had happened. Because it takes, like, I don't know, it takes an hour to go a second or something like that. So they have to plan a bunch of stuff and then let it run. And so they're weird. They both have this weird interaction with time, where the primal character sometimes will see the world go too fast for it, and the robot has to survive somehow in that time frame. Oh, Hamish has got another one possibility that the robot's actually remotely operated, so it has a delay. And the delay is really weird because the speed of light doesn't work the same way in this time manipulated environment. Anyway, this is all really cool. I'm looking at the clock now. I'm just like, oh shit. We could do this for hours. In fact, I have done this for hours before on other concepts, and it totally works. Okay, so let's move on. We have an idea of gameplay, and I like where your ideas are going. Let's go to the elevator pitch. Have people heard of the concept of an elevator pitch? It's a weird idea, but the idea is that I run into say Randy Pitchford in the elevator. I just like it because his name's got pitch in it. He's one of the presidents of Gearbox Software, which is one of the companies I like. I think I like a lot of the things that they do. But the elevator is only going to put him and me together for 20 seconds. So I need to pitch this idea to him well enough that he's going to be like, I want to pick up your idea, and I'm going to give you 100 developers to work on it. This would be great, you know. But I would need to pitch that well enough in that time. So can I name this game and describe it in 30 seconds? So we've got maybe 3 lines of text here. What do you think? People can give candidate names for this game right now into chat, and we'll put them together. So Cineo's got one called The Time. I find that interesting. That's pretty cool. Let's see what everyone else thinks. I'm going to put this one in. This one's been taken. Age of Mark. I'm not going to put Age of Mark or Xenoblade Chronicles in there. Real Time is cool. Timeline, Timeless. Times of Future Past. Wait. Gonna get sued by Marvel. Give it a really indie name like The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Okay, we're not gonna do that. I've got an idea for one as well, because Time Splitters was a joke, but Time Split might be one, so that gives the duality as well. Chronological Age of Ultron. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. I'm not writing that down. Chronologically different. Your marketing team doesn't like you very much. They're just going to be like, no, you have to shorten it. Why don't you call it Chrono Trigger? Chrono Trigger, very, very good game. Haven't played that much of it, but I've just like been told it's like, if I was to play it all of it, it's really, really good. Chrono Age. Lots of cool things. Entanglement. Ooh. I think Entanglement might be something where we would have to make that some kind of core gameplay mechanic. Chrononauts. I'm not putting that in either. Wait. Is that a real game already? Or maybe that's not a real game. Trigger Chrono 2. Chrono Splitter. Alright. Okay. I'm not going to bother deciding on this. I'm starting to rush now because I know that I have other stuff I want to teach you today. Some of the stuff that's in today's slides is going to get moved into Wednesdays. Okay. So we need to actually be able to pitch this in a way that's going to just kind of deliver the idea. So this one I'm just going to write because it's too hard to try to do this in the group. So too close to a black hole where time moves differently on either side. One half of the planet is a technological marvel, while the other is a preservation of a primal era. Our two characters are from different worlds while being from the same planet. see, I got it. I know my marketing hype. Imagine a planet too close to a black hole where time moves differently on either side. One half of the planet is a technological marvel, while the other is a preservation of a primal era. Our two characters are from different worlds while being from the same planet. When their paths collide. Okay, someone give me the end. I need something. When their paths collide. Even time itself will split into endless possibilities. Okay. Okay, that's... Look, I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek here. That was a bit crap. We would have to have this be less hype train and more useful, right? Because we didn't even say that this is like a third-person narrative adventure game. We would have to say something like that. Okay. Title is a third-person action adventure game with two main characters and an innovative time dilation mechanic. We haven't made the mechanic yet, doesn't matter, we'll figure that out later. Yeah, timeline is something that we could definitely call it. Again, we could call it... the name is something we'd have to figure out, because I think that at some point we would have to change the name based on the fact that you can't Google the game, you know? We'd have to give it something that we would make it findable, searchable, sorry. Get your search engine optimization stuff going to make it work. So we'd combine some words together. So some of these actually combine words together in a way that might work. Chrono Age probably hasn't. The spelling it with a K also helps. Anyway. That's where I'm stopping at this point. So this is where I'm getting to, is like, here's the thing that we've put together. And it took us, okay, it was longer than half an hour. It was about 45 minutes. But still, this is interesting, right? There's something that we could do with this if we wanted to. And so this is the kind of thing that would then move on into being something. Mark Chi's Age of Mark. Mark Chi's Quantum Trigger Poggers. Okay. So we're not using any of those, but like, I do laugh at the developers who get famous enough that their name sells the next game rather than the game itself. So it's like, you put your name or your company's name on it, and then people join up with it. Or worse, they take the company's name off things because they don't want to be associated with it. Okay. So that's what we've got there. And that gives you an insight into some of the creation process that actually happens for games. So this is actually the starting point for the art. And we can already start to think about how we would actually take that art further. So, Kathy, that's perfect. Yes. Hang on. Where is it? Where's my document? Oh, it's on this window. It's called break time. It's so meta. It's so meta because it only exists within the context of this lecture. Okay, so break time. Now that we're here in break time, I want to say that if you are interested in learning this whole process, try doing something like a game jam. You could someone's to clip my cackle. So game jams do this. So what we did just then is something that I used to do with friends for game jams. Is that 45 minutes would probably be stretched out for the first sort of 2-3 hours of a 48-hour game jam. So we would sit down together on the evening of the first day of the 48 hours, and we say, okay, we need to make something, and we would go through that process. We probably wouldn't do a big budget AAA third person action adventure game like we're pitching here. It would be something simpler if we're going to do it in 48 hours. But game jams allow you to like learn this whole process in a kind of a microcosm. So you actually have to do this concepting. Then from there, we have to do designs. We have to do gameplay design and stuff like that. And we have to figure out what... So bringing this back to graphics, this actual course, right? We'd have to figure out what graphics we're going to use. So there's a whole lot of stuff in there with that time mechanic that we have to do something really interesting. And we'd have to make sure that our lighting systems and our way we're going to render things fits both of these mechanics, you know. So we're going to want a turn-based camera overlay thing from above, and we're going to need a third-person camera attached to our players, and at different times we're going to go back and forth in between them. So we're going to need to handle the code that actually manages those things. So yeah, we would, in a game jam, we could do concept and then design, implementation, test things, and then we actually do have to do a release. So within these 48 hours, you kind of get a really, really good idea of a lot of the different steps that go into making these things. Global Game Jam is the big one. That's the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. You've seen this t-shirt before. I think I wore it in one of the early lectures. This is how I got into it, because Sydney runs part of Global Game Jam in a sense. Like, there's always part of this jam happening in Sydney. Usually happens near the end of January, actually. So you're at a good time now to actually start thinking about if you want to take part in something like this. A lot of what we're coding in graphics, we probably wouldn't even use in it. We would use pre-built stuff instead, but graphics is teaching you all the basics about how that works. itch.io has heaps of jams. Like, there's always, it's like, pick any hour of any day of the year and there's a jam running somewhere in the world. So yeah, Hexa says Ludum Dare. Ludum Dare is one of the famous ones as well. Should be there in itch.io, like all the jams there. Yeah, anyway, so let's take a break. We've gone a bit longer before break today. 5:34. I'm going to make it quick because I want to launch into some other stuff that we're talking about today. But it's all right. It's totally fine if I don't finish everything that I had planned for today and we drift further along into doing it next lecture, because next lecture actually just flows on from what we're doing, so it's totally fine. So 5:34, let's come back 5:37, so we'll take a 3-minute break and we'll go into the rest of the lecture. we're back. So, we're here. We've written all this stuff down, and it's probably not just writing. There's going to be heaps of drawing and stuff. So all I did was like the idea of the planet, right? And that gave us a cool setting. We'd also have someone probably already drawing what these characters might look like. I don't think I should get into the character drawing. It's not my strong suit. Although I might try that in a second, because we're about to talk about that. But we've got a story, we've got a setting, and we know what's going on here. So what we're going to end up getting is hi Sam. we're going to end up with two art styles coming through here, and we're probably going to have to support that. As the programmers in this project, one of the things that we'd have to do is really think about how to represent this time difference thing, because we've got our delta time and our frame by frame stuff happening, but what we're going to need is to make the appearance of one going slower than the other, and I don't know how. That's an interesting, difficult thing. We're not going to be alone in this. So after this bit of work here that gets us to the point where we think we have a game that we're going to make, we would then break up into our kind of separate disciplines. And so your tech lead would go and talk to the programmers about what the engine's requirements are going to be. Your game designers are going to go and try to figure out how to do gameplay for this. How do we do this turn-based versus real-time thing? How do we do this speed up and slow down? Like, what are we even going to do? How do we want people to feel when they're doing this? And your artists are going to go away, and what they're going to do is they're going to say, all right, let's start concepting these two worlds and these two characters. So when we go from context to design, so I don't want to talk too much about what the other disciplines are going to do for this bit. It's mostly what the graphics programmer might do, because that's our perspective at this point. So what are we going to be working on? Like, we're in charge of the game engine. So whether this game engine is an out-of-the-box game engine like Unity or Unreal, even if it is that, it doesn't matter. We're still going to require a programmer to do a lot of work in that. Like, we're going to have to figure out what kind of shaders are we putting together for these particular things. Do we want a really specific time manipulation set of code that we're going to use for things and stuff? And so we need to start building up that technology at this point. So what does this game look like? Are we building up a renderer for a realistic thing or a stylistic thing? We need to talk to our art directors about that kind of thing and what they want to do. And they probably haven't figured this out yet, right? But we can look at viewpoints and cameras, because we've already had a hint from the game designers that we've got a combination of real-time third-person action. I don't know, maybe it's action or maybe not. We don't know what tempo this game is at. Actually, we should have talked about that before, but anyway, we needed to compress that conversation so that we could get onto the rest of the lecture. But, you know, what does the player need to see, and how will they see things? So in the turn-based thing, do they need to see like a grid for movement and stuff, or is it more open? Or in the third-person action, how do we make sure the camera is like connected to the player in a good way and doesn't clip through walls and trees and other stuff? That, by the way, is one of the most hated things in game development, is having to deal with where the camera is in relation to someone like a third-person character. So often it's like the character, and there's a vector coming out of the character, and that holds the camera. And then you walk somewhere, and there's a wall going through that vector, and so you've got to move the camera forward into that wall, or you choose to make that wall temporarily transparent. Both of those things are fiddly things to do, and you've got to figure out what effect that has on a person and stuff. So this is so much stuff on third-person cameras and just trying to make them work. First-person cameras are a bit easier, but for gameplay reasons, third-person cameras make a lot of sense, because then you can see the player and the world they're in. Jason's assuming there's going to be a sequel. I'm assuming there's not even going to be the first game made. Cineo saying Break Time is the most ambitious RPG of 2021. Branching storylines and player choices making a difference in the world. Oh no, that's you know, whenever we say something like One game, though. One game appears to actually be making good on the promises. No Man's Sky. I'm really impressed by them continually developing that game. Like, what are we looking at? 2-3 years after the fact now? And they're actually making good on most of their promises, which is kind of amazing. But I think they were very honorable in that they said that stuff, and a lot of money went into the game, and they took that money and they said, we're not just going to like walk away with this money, we're actually feeding it back into development. We're going to do these features. We always intended to do these features, right? So it's like, it's full on, right? Yeah, Simon's like, this is the timeline where No Man's Sky is successful. Yep. And then we can ask what happened to, I don't know, Anthem. It's like, this is the timeline where Anthem went meow and flopped. That's what you get. It's whether you're in touch with EA or Sony. If you get a choice between publishers, pick Sony. Anyway, so yeah, there's a bunch of tech that we might use, and for our particular game, the things that we need to worry about is representing the movement of time, which for plenty of other games would be like, what do you mean? It's just delta time. Just use delta time. Time's always the same. But in this game, it is not. So we would have to do something with that. And I think that's super interesting. And we have to figure out what tech we're going to use for that. And then it'd be like, what hardware are we running on? This feels like, I mean, to me, this feels like a PlayStation game. Which means that you're going to run it on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and then you're going to figure out if it can run on the Switch. Because the Switch at a lower spec hardware might not be able to keep up with what you're doing. You're unlikely to try to want to run this on mobile. This just doesn't feel like the kind of game for that. But, you know, probably what you would do is if you had a deal, as I said, I want to get published by Sony, so I would go start, the initial development would be on the PS5 dev kit, and then we would like port it to other things as well. Simon's saying design for Switch, easy ports. It's always easier to port to something that has better hardware than what you made it on. Yeah. Okay, so I think I've already talked about this, but anyway, what would you do at this point is to look at the concept and say, what do we need to do? And you start preparing for these things, you start working on these things. And a lot of this forms like the early work, but it also depends on how long you're going to work for, what you're going to do with these things. So yeah, so that's the idea of like where we would go as the programmers assigned to a project. So it's like, I'm the graphics programmer in this particular game company. We're not the small company if there's only one graphics programmer, but that happens, right? Plenty of games are only like made by like half a dozen people, that kind of thing, or less. But yeah, you'd start planning for that kind of thing. So I want to jump across now because, like, yes, we can do the planning as a graphics programmer, and we're going to build up the expertise for that as we go along, as we learn more about graphics. But this week's lectures are actually devoted not necessarily to us as the graphics programmer, but as the people who are going to provide us with the things that we're going to put into the game engine. So the reason that I was talking so much about art today, and I was talking about concepting and design and stuff, is I'm kind of talking about the rest of the team. So the next thing I want to talk about, I don't have much time for it, but we'll just start this today, and if I don't finish it, it's fine. We'll continue it on Wednesday. Wednesday was going to need a recap of some of this stuff anyway. So I want to talk about developing a character. And so what I want to teach you about is the art pipeline. Because a lot of the time when we're thinking about this as graphics programmers, we're just going to be like, assets happen, you know? Someone makes 3D assets. I don't know how, but when I receive said 3D assets, I get a large array of vertices, and each of those vertices is going to have enough information, I guess, for this model to work. I'm going to get given a series of other files, like textures and other maps, materials, things that are surface data. Now, we haven't talked that much about this yet, but we will talk about other forms of surface data other than textures as we get further into the course. And we'd get a set of animations and things like that. So there's all this other information that comes in there, but how is this stuff made? And we're going to look at this in terms of like the art pipeline. I'm going to move myself out of the way. It's hard to find a spot where I'm not covering it up. So the reason I was playing Halo today is because I'd found a bunch of really cool imagery published by Bungie Studios about the making of Halo. So you can actually see here the Master Chief has, you know, a polygon mesh, right? We can create this. Like, there's a few here that are quads, but even those can be split into triangles. If we wanted to, if we had the time and effort, we could just copy the locations of all of these things and go, all right, here's a Master Chief. And then we have the surfacing here, and there's some surfacing detail, which I haven't taught you about, but we will. And then like the textures attached. So we can do all of this. But what this comes from is these early things, which is concept art sketches. So this is the concepting side before we get into design and production. So pre-production is where we get involved in a sense, not necessarily us involved, but when this thing goes from a sketch and an idea to vertices, edges, polygons, and textures and stuff like that. And then your post-production after that is where we're going to go back. So we're not just going to be like, this is it and it never changes. We're going to go back and reconcept, redesign and stuff like that. So I was reading about Lord of the Rings, which admittedly has not very much CG in it. So it's not super relevant to computer graphics. But one of the leaders of the orcs, this is just posted on Weta Workshop recently. One of the leaders of the Uruk-hai, which is Saruman's orcs, or I don't know if this was this particular one, but it was sculpted 100 times before they took the final one and used it. Now, I would assume that a few of those 100 sculpts turned into like the other soldiers, so they didn't have to waste them and things, but they literally sculpted them in clay, ideas for how they might look 100 times before they took it. So while this might be an early sketch, this is literally an early sketch from one of Bungie's concept artists, it's definitely not the only one, and many different ideas would have been put forward before we got this Master Chief that we know now. And I like that the Master Chief is like such a strange but super iconic symbol in computer games. So he's very, very well known. And it's interesting to get a character that becomes that well known. There's so much work that goes into the background of this. So I'm not going to get all the way through this process today, but that's fine. Yeah, and a lot of people, like Simon saying Tetsuya Nomura's concept for Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts was really interesting. I think the first instance of really, really serious concept art for computer games was Street Fighter 2. That was one of the first times they went really above and beyond in that. There's actually some documentaries about that. About Street Fighter 2 being one of the first times that people crossed over, because that was back in the Sprite days, and back in the Sprite days there was no point doing concept art because it was so simple what was going to be on screen, and Street Fighter 2 was one of the games that really shifted that into another direction. So, concepting. And this is cool because I wrote this slide not knowing what our game was, but we have an idea now of a concept, and I said, have we given them a name? But there's two of them now, so it's interesting. Should they have a name? I don't know. So we've got two characters. One of them is a robot designed to make humans feel comfortable around it, but also designed to operate at different speeds. I don't even know how we'd represent that visually. So this is a hugely difficult one. And the primal side is a human. But we would definitely have ideas here, right? So we would definitely, this one is going to be easier for us to work with than this one. This one's going to need a lot more work to figure out what we're doing. But what our artists would do at this point, I say we, right? I'm actually putting us amongst the artists. Some of you might actually be accomplished artists that can draw or paint this, and I could actually do this. But I'm not assuming that, because there's no artistic prerequisites for graphics. Graphics prerequisites are all about technical programming capability, which comes into this later when we start talking about how we're actually going to like work with this model. When I get into animation and rigging, we're actually going to be involved there, but that's going to be on Wednesday. So, but the thing that's going to happen first is doing research. So we might even just do like, I don't know, tribal humans. And we look up images, and there's so many possibilities here. I wonder if I don't know the right words for it, right? But yeah, it could be something like this where we literally place them in a different era. So if we change their proportions and things like that, and we say this is like a different step in human evolution because the timelines are so far out. I mean, like, all right, let's just steal all the concept art from Far Cry Primal. Sometimes giving people a link to something they already know can help. So we could do something like that. I was actually thinking of Horizon Zero Dawn kind of thing, because you could get this really cool thing where your character is from this kind of pre-medieval era, but there's a lot of like stuff that has appeared, like from the technological side. So there's like this, you could even have this combo of them using old pieces of technology to adorn their clothing and stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. But I mean, obviously you don't want to just copy something that someone else has already done in another game, right? But there's possibilities there. So that's the kind of thing where our artists would start doing that. And most of the concept artists and like 3D modelers and people I know, they love Pinterest. So what they'll basically do is they'll have a Pinterest board where for this game they'll have a Pinterest board and they'll start dropping things in there. And I've got a friend who's just got like this mecha library, and he's got like 300 images or something in there. And he's like, anytime he wants to do something that's like slightly robotic, he goes straight to his mecha library and he goes through and goes, I think this one's going to be like this, you know? So, let's look up androids for the other one. And we have to think about, ooh, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do this kind of like creepy synthetic skin kind of android? I don't know if we want that in a computer game. Or are we going to do something like, these are the concepts of the internals of Detroit become human. So we could do these kinds of things. This is a stock image of androids. Like, do we want these androids to have this kind of really obvious to us as humans that they're not human, so that we can kind of do some art like that, tell the character apart? We would be spending a lot of time going back and forth with art directors and the game directors and the game designers to see like, how do we want this thing to look? Because it could end up being something like this, where the body is all kind of weird bits and pieces, and then like the face is the only thing that's realistic. So we could do something like that. There's so many options. Oh, Ex Machina, classic movie. I think I tell people to watch that even in COMP3421, because it's about like questions about artificial intelligence. You've got, this is the android from Metropolis, I think is the movie. Is that the android from Metropolis? I can't remember. It looks a bit like it. Yeah, and so there's all these different things that you could tap into here as possibilities for how this should look. So if you want to create empathy, you might do this kind of thing like what was in Ex Machina, which has a human face, and then the whole rest of it is just a robot, but the human face is enough to actually get you enough of connection with humans. And so back and forth design, creation of these things would be happening. I'm assuming that concept sketches for a character would happen a few hundred times before they would actually get to the point where we would start solidifying down to the actual character. Oh, sorry. I always talk about the slide before I get there. So yeah, that's where we would start sketching these things. So we would start drawing these things, taking things from our references and painting them. I really wanted to draw stuff here, but I just don't think it's a good idea because it's not going to help. Me going to Microsoft Paint and trying to draw the two characters, I think would, I mean, it'd be entertaining for you, but I don't think it'd be very educational. So yeah, but that's the first step. And at this point, the artists will very much be leveraging things from other fields, in a sense, like their ability to paint, their ability to sketch, and things like that. It's going to be very different from what we'd see from a computer science perspective, because at this point, only some artists will be even on computers. Some artists will be on just pencil and paper, right? Some people like to draw in actual drawing applications like Adobe Illustrator and stuff like that, but other people just do it on paper, and that's fine because at the concept stage it doesn't have any necessity to be digitized at this point, other than like to be sending around to different people, in which case you can just take a photo of what you've drawn. So then we get into sculpting, which is often digital sculpting, but it's not always digital sculpting. We do a lot of stuff with like maquettes, which is like small sculptures of things that we can either scan in later to become 3D models, or we can just simply show people and they can move it around and go, not this one, maybe this one, you know, so we can make multiple different sculpts of things. So could be clay, could be pixels, you know, either one still works. So we're still not entirely in the realm of us in computer graphics yet, but we will potentially be using a 3D modeling or sculpting program. So Maya, 3ds Max, ZBrush, you would have heard of some of these things. We're obviously not going to go into these programs because I think they're beyond what we can do in a computer graphics course. What we are going to do though is we know how these programs display things, and we know how these programs work with like verts and triangles and stuff like that under the hood, because that's where we work. We work in the technology, not necessarily in the interface that the artists use to do these things. At this point, we're not expecting any of this stuff to be game ready. We're not expecting to be dropping this stuff into our game engine just yet. So we're expecting at this point, if it is like 3D scanned, in particular, definitely if it's 3D scanned, there's going to be way too many polygons to run efficiently, because the 3D scanners will likely put in a whole bunch of extra verts anytime there's even a mild curve in something. And also, this sculpting is just the geometry, the three-dimensional geometry, so it's just verts. We don't have any other information yet. So if we don't have textures or anything like that, we don't have any colors for this. We don't have anything to show whether it's reflecting light and stuff like that. So early days yet. But I'm going to leave us there because we've just hit 6 p.m. I'm going to go through the rest of this process. So I've got slides. It's going to go through how we work with them, optimization, textures, rigging, animation, and stuff like that, and what actually ends up going in. So all of that stuff I'll cover on Wednesday. Especially good, because on Wednesday I'm going to cover stuff like rigging and animation stuff in the detail that we might want to look at it. Like if we're actually going to do this, how does this work from a mathematical perspective and stuff? So it's actually better that I talk about that on Wednesday. So yeah, what did we learn today? We got a glimpse into the world of how computer graphics fits into a larger world. The larger world of computer-generated art, whether that computer-generated art is film, television, still images, stuff like that. We looked at concept in computer games, and now we have a concept. We're going to carry that through. I don't know if I've got anyone who could do it, who has enough time to do it between now and Wednesday, because I have some friends who would probably be able to quickly knock up some concept art and a really basic 3D model of one of these characters. It might be really interesting to see that. I'll ask around, see if I can find someone short notice. Yeah, so we're now partway through this as well, is following the art pipeline, following through the creation of this art that will get us to the verts of polygons and the package that we actually receive as a programmer. We're not going to physically receive it, but you know, it's going to turn up in our source control, and then we're going to plug it into our game engines and make sure it works, transform it into position, that kind of thing. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you. This was I found this lecture really interesting, actually, because it's like putting together something like this, I think, is a really interesting thing to see how the context of how this stuff actually gets created, I think, is really interesting. So thank you for making Break Time. Such a good name. Thank you. I can't remember who came up with that, but like that was like someone when Break Time happened came up with that. It was very, very cool. Cineo's asking if advanced graphics is happening next year. I doubt it. I mean, like, if it was happening next year, I think I would have had to have started thinking about it already. So I would have had to start thinking about it. I would have had to ping someone by now and say, let's put that back on the handbook for next year. Because graphics, this course, I'd already kind of claimed it, in a sense, more than a year ago. It was like halfway through 2020 when I expressed interest in bringing this course back. So I think it was going to take longer than that if advanced graphics is going to happen. Okay, I'm just going to put it into break mode to say the lecture is officially over, and I'll come back afterwards and answer any questions if there are any. All right, I'm back. I don't know if anyone's going to have any questions, because I feel like today we didn't do anything technical, and we didn't do anything that I think might need clarification, other than, like, you know, what is art? Be like, I can't clarify that. I took my shot at it. I don't know. You got my guesses, which are in no way, I mean, they're only partially informed. I've done some art, so yeah, there you go. That's it. I guess I've read enough about what other people said to not try to define it. I'm smart enough not to say that I know it. Yeah, advanced graphics. Was it 10 years ago? I'm assuming that when Tim Lambert left UNSW, that would have been the last time. Simon once colored in a picture and your mum called it art. No, Simon, you have put your art in the random channel already, because you put a music performance in the Discord. So you are an artist. You have done art to the point where you actually went to the trouble of putting it all together and recording it and stuff like that. I would never belittle someone who's gone to that effort, you know. You didn't know I'd seen it. Yeah, and now everyone's gonna go looking for it because I've just spoken about it in a lecture. Yeah. Yeah, so I think Tim Lambert was the last person to run that. Tim Lambert was the person who taught me graphics. So there are some things in graphics that I teach you that are what I can remember from what he taught me in, I think it was 2002 when I did graphics. If I remember it correctly, it was around then. Oh, it could have been 2001, actually. Yeah, I think it was 2001, and I taught it in 2002 and 2003. But I don't know, it was so long ago, I can't remember that stuff. But yeah, advanced graphics was like a workshop project based course where there was only about 20 or 30 of us in it, and it was like make something by the end of the term, and every week we'd get these little seminars on super, super difficult topics. And I just remember not being able to handle a bunch of them and just being like, okay, so my project is going to be something on one of these ones that I think I can actually do. Because there's some stuff that's a really bit fiddly. But nowadays it might be different, right? Because if we're talking like nearly 20 years ago, graphics is most certainly very different between 20 years ago and today. There's so much stuff going on. Like, we've got real-time ray tracing nowadays. But there's all this extra tech now. Because I think back then, if I remember correctly, we had texturing, but I don't think we had shaders. Let me look it up. See if there's a history shader Wikipedia. There's so much good stuff on Wikipedia. History. Shader was introduced in the pub by Pixar 1988. I don't think we were using it then. OpenGL supported shaders. First video card with a programmable shader, GeForce 3 2001. Yeah. So when I was studying graphics, shaders existed, but they weren't widespread enough that I'd actually learnt about it back then. So it's interesting. We're actually going to try to make this game? No, we're not. Unless someone wants to. But again, what was that? 45 minutes. I would, if I wanted to make a game, I would pick my team first. I would find the people who were going to make it. And then I'd go through that process again. That wasn't that hard, right? It took us 45 minutes and we came up with some interesting ideas. I have had some really, really funny games come out of that process that I just did. I think one of my favorite ones that came out of this like half-hour process was a game where you were marshmallows and it was set inside the human digestive system. So it was a 2D platformer where you were trying to jump on other bits of food so that you didn't fall into the stomach acid and get eaten. So it was like so cool. Yeah. Hamish is going to try to make a prototype inspired by this for assignment 2. Yeah, go for it, right? Totally go for it. Or if you want to, just do something else, right? Because it doesn't take this long to come up with this. Again, as I said, ideas are cheap. Ideas are plentiful. Even ideas like this, where you can literally look at this idea and go, this could be a big, like, a big action adventure game. This could be like the blockbuster of 2025 or something like that, right? It doesn't sound so different from the games that are being shipped out from the big AAA publishers and stuff like that, right? But at the same time, yeah, because we could generate that idea that quickly without any kind of professional game writers or film script writers or anything like that, that just goes to show that anyone can punch out that kind of idea. And it's not whether that idea is feasible or not. It's more about whether you can go through the process and turn this thing into something that actually works. So for me, stepping into the role of like a producer publisher before we would greenlight something like this, I mean, I love like just fantasizing that I could be at that level. But if I was, I would be like, there's these big questions here of like, okay, you got this time manipulation thing. I like your narrative. Your narrative, you can definitely just do something with that. There's a dystopia on the tech side. The tribals are being mistreated when they go across to the tech side because they move slower and all this kind of stuff. There's totally, you can talk the political drama. You can do romance and politics and all this kind of stuff. You can hook people in, 100%, no qualms there. How the hell are you gonna do this stuff? Like, yeah, swapping between characters, done. We just copy what other people did. You know, hour and a half on this character, hour and a half on this character. 2 hours on this character, half an hour on this character, back and forth, different viewpoints on the same scenes. We get a good writer on board. That stuff's done. Time manipulation, not so good. One always going fast, the other always going slow. How? how do we make this so that the humans playing the game inherently understand it without having to like do anything weird? They don't have to wrap their head around really specific ways of playing and stuff like that. How do we do this? Don't know. I would be tempted to get what's his name? Nier Automata. That game director, and ask them, because he was just like abstract 2D bullet hell shooter, side-scrolling combat, third-person action, swapping genres every 10 minutes kind of thing. I think it requires that kind of brilliance to figure out what to do with this. Yokotaro, thank you very much. Yeah. So yeah, what are people saying? Yeah, like people are talking about the marshmallows in the stomach acid's pretty funny. Someone reminding that the subjective mark is only 10%. I love how you spelt subjective mark with a C. Let me I'll see if I've got it here. It's quite funny. The is that tomorrow's lecture? This is some of the responses for the survey. So I'm not only going to show you statistical responses. I don't want to show what what people have actually said. But did you enjoy subjective marks? I was happy that the majority of people either don't mind it or the vast majority enjoyed it. So that's cool. But then this is the funny thing, is the time effort. Pretty much close to half the people that responded spent more time on the 10% than they did on the 90%. And then most everyone else spent the same amount of time. And then the people who were like, okay, I just need to do the assignment, all right? And you can spend less time and still get decent marks in the subjective. So, but it was interesting that people are spending way more than more than 50% on 10% of the marks. And then here, people are like, no, 10%'s fine though. And like some people maybe wanted less marks, some people wanted more marks, roughly balancing out to like, we're going to keep the 10%. So I found this super interesting, that it's like people enjoyed it. People put more effort into it than I gave you marks for, yet they don't want the marks to change. And I feel like that's a very interesting, very interesting perspective on what people think. I'm going to count that as a win. For me, as an educational designer, I count that 100% as a win. So I've given you something that you wanted to work on regardless of how many marks it was, even to the point where you're like, nah, don't change the marks. We're good. That's all we wanted out of this. It's a dream for an educator to be able to give something to their students, and the students say, we're doing this because we want to do it. So the students have reached a level of motivation and inspiration in something where you're like, oh no, we're doing this because we want to do it. We're here because we want to learn about it. You know, it's not about the marks. I'm not here for a wham booster. I'm here because I actually want to learn the content, so I'm going to put extra work into it. And I'm just like, bingo. That makes me happy. So yeah, it's nice. Oh, Simon wants someone to make Jax. Is it Jack or Jax? Well, I can't remember. I kind of vaguely remember the game. Yeah. Simon hates games that do that mechanic, switching characters. Oh well, we accidentally designed one today. Sinio, get this idea to Ubisoft. Oh no. We get to Ubisoft, and then all of the character will get taken out of it. There will be no time mechanic, and it will be one person, and it'll just be third person over the shoulder, and it'll just be like really boring. Yeah, wave plus one. The sun rises and falls fast. That's the only thing that will happen in the Ubisoft version of this game. Jack and Dexter. All right, I was thinking Jax or something else. Oh. All right. I think we've talked enough today. I don't think there's any questions today. I think we're just chatting now. But I think it would be really funny for people to prototype parts of break time in assignment 2. I think that would be really funny. Mignon is asking, is it possible to ask if there is some information for assignment 2 and marks or feedback for assignment 1? Assignment 1 is being marked at the moment. It will be marked over the course of this week. We will probably release the marks at the end of this week. And assignment 2 will come out roughly at the same time. So basically, what you should get is the specification for assignment 2 and your marks for assignment 1. So you'll be able to say, okay, these are the things that I did or didn't do well in assignment 1. So this is the stuff I'm going to work on for assignment 2. But I think that look for the course notices and your email around the Sunday, Monday, I reckon. At the end of this week, start of next week. Around then is when I'm expecting to release both of those things roughly at the same time. Like, we're not planning them to have to be the same time. We're just expecting them to be roughly the same time. Jason's asking if assignment 2 is about lighting and 3D. Yeah. So it'll be a 3D thing where we're going to... So the way that the subject lined up worked pretty well for us. So we can actually have this kind of... I don't want to say it's a cruisy week 5, but it's not a high pressure week 5. But the second we come back in week 7, we turn the pressure on immediately and we go, we're going to do lighting. Lighting is like super important to how graphics goes from just being able to display 3D objects to making them look 3D to the viewer, because the way the light plays off them shows that they're 3D. And so we're going to spend a couple of weeks really delving into different ways to do lighting, and then we're going to do some advanced topics after that. And then you'll be able to hand in your second assignment sometime around the end of us teaching about lighting. And so you will be expected to use some of the lighting stuff in the second assignment. And then the third assignment will allow you to incorporate the extra cool bits that we've put in, and also allow you to show off with anything you want. So if you've learned something else, maybe from the extra stuff that we've been giving out in the course, or just from other things, or even just possible ramifications of what we've taught you. Like, we teach you basic versions of things and you go, oh, I think I can take this a step further. That's kind of what assignment 3 is going to be. But it's also just kind of like a, did you understand everything from the course? As a kind of a take-home exam, in a sense. Senior's saying, by looking at flexing channel, bet there's going to be someone doing ray tracing for assignment 3 from pure mathematics. You can. It's it's not easy. Also, I think the funniest thing about doing something like ray tracing would be, does it run? Like, when we're talking about whether it runs on your tutor's computers that are marking it, we're now going to have performance issues on your tutor's computers. They'll be like, that'd be great. So now my tutors can, if they want to, buy graphics cards and tax deduct them. So you can keep your graphics card, but you can get a pretty hefty discount on it. Well, depending how much money you make. I always think of tax deducting as being a huge discount on something, but I think that's because I have a full-time salary, so I'm in a higher tax bracket. So if you're in a lower tax bracket, it's not really a discount at all. But, you know. By the time we get to the end of term, maybe we will have some graphics computers at CSE, and we can do something with them, but no promises. Especially not trying to make a promise that 300 people can come into campus and use these things that aren't set up yet or anything like that. Waveflaz was asking if it is possible in OpenGL to do ray tracing. It is, like, technically possible. As in, ray tracing is simple mathematics. It's just a simple mathematics of bouncing vectors around. Whether you're talking about true hardware support for ray tracing, that's a different story. And I don't think that's easy at all. But you could potentially do ray tracing in your shaders. So get all the vector maths happening in the shaders, and then it is running on the hardware. But whether there's specific accelerations for ray tracing that you turn on and off, I haven't dug that much into it. I am not, and you will forgive me for saying this because it's entirely not in the plan, is I have not prepared us in any way for either teaching or testing ray tracing in our current setup for this course. Not even in the slightest. It's not on the menu. I'm going to talk about it though, because everyone wants to hear about it, but that's going to be like, you know, like in week 10, when the lecturer just goes, okay, here's some stuff. It is not part of the course, but because we have no tutorials left after this, I'm going to show you some stuff and then you can think about it. That's where ray tracing belongs in this course, not in the actual content. There are so many things that we should do before we get to ray tracing. There's so many pieces of technology that are bread and butter for modern graphics, not just like this icing on the cake thing that ray tracing is nowadays. So yeah, it's cool. And I do understand ray tracing is really cool. And especially, I think, what I've heard nowadays, if you go back into Cyberpunk now, Cyberpunk 2077, now that it has had a lot of patches, a lot of performance upgrades and stuff, the ray tracing actually works reasonably well in real time. And so you go through the city at night when it's raining and it looks amazing. But, you know, it took a while to get there. And you're going to need like at least 3060 or 3070 series graphics card to actually get that view. But apparently it looks really good now. You know, if I can be bothered downloading it again. We'll see. I'm playing Halo instead. I'm playing old games instead. Oh, there you go. Cineo saying Crytek's ray tracing demos didn't require hardware support. So if you just write code that's optimized enough... Oh, Simon doesn't think OpenGL 3.3 has the stuff needed. Yeah, so 3.3 wasn't really made for it. However, if you just did raw vector calculations in your shaders, it's technically possible. It's kind of like this. What this would be like is like reinventing the wheel. If I gave you a chunk of wood and some rocks to carve it with, as opposed to all of the technology that we would normally use to reinvent a wheel, like a lathe, something that can turn wood, and metal tools or something, you know, right? That's what I'm saying. Is like if you want to do ray tracing with our current infrastructure, you will be doing a lot of stuff manually. I heard, though, that Simon and Xavier wanted to do something where they'd actually put together a rudimentary ray tracing example that won't look very good, but will functionally work and show you some of the maths. We'll see how it works. Yeah, if someone wants to branch out from OpenGL and do some stuff in DirectX and do it, please don't. Oh, sorry, Simon. I said stuff. Oh, well, they may or may not do it. I think that they're not going to. There you go. That covers that up, right? Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So don't expect anything for ray tracing because we're really not set up for it. I would prefer talking about deferred rendering before ray tracing, because I think it's used much more often and is kind of reasonable and efficient technology that's in use. Whereas ray tracing is something that is, I mean, I guess it's current because some things are using it, but I think it's a few years off before we can say that like every game's using it. I reckon we're probably like 5 years away from that, as opposed to as opposed to like deferred rendering where we're now kind of 5 to 10 years on from it being new and maybe useful in a sense. I will talk about both of them though. I think there's a good thing for a lecture in week 10 where I say, now that we've finished everything in this course, what are some of the things that can go further based on the ideas that we have here? And I'll talk about them then. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all. Thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed this delve into the other side of what happens when we're making graphics, in a sense, because most graphics is games, and the rest of it is film, which goes through the same process. Oh, actually, there's still also a percentage of things which is like specific simulations, data visualization, and all this other stuff, which won't necessarily have this kind of really human focused storyline stuff happening. All right, gonna wrap it up there. Thank you all. I'll see you on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we are going to continue with the stuff that I didn't get through here, and then go on to the actual technical side of working with models and rigging and animation and stuff like that. All right, see ya.